The first 3 seconds have to grab someone or they're going to scroll away.
You don't need to be a 10 out of 10 copywriter to get a multi-million-dollar client, because most of the time you're not directly competing with the best copywriters. You're competing against...
Specificity is actually the driver of good copywriting. Digging into story helps dig into that specificity. They instantly feel connected to that brand or to that buy-in.
I mean, take, for example, an 8-figure business owner, right? They may be very, very well known and recognized, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their copy is the 10 out of 10 copy. It might be the brand that's doing most of the heavy lifting. The reader knows that they're reading a sales message. They're just going to turn off.
People don't want to be sold to. Huge brands like Disney or Coca-Cola, they're selling merchandise and people are wearing their brand, literally walking advertisements. And it's because they feel connected with the brand, like they find their identity in it. But people just aren't going to go for like the mediocre anymore. It's also not good enough just to have a strong hook.
If I have to scroll down to start caring, it's too late. If you give me all this context previously, it's not the same as the natural experience that a prospect is experiencing. So how do you actually improve your command over the English language?
The biggest thing is you have to step into your customer's shoes. This is where I think the fiction helps. People are honest in reviews. Some of my best copywriting angles, ads, and emails have been because I found a sweet little gem. I don't want to give away my secrets, but
all right, today I'm here with Abigail Allen. You have done a lot of really great work in the industry. I've seen a lot of your copy. You know, we've worked together in the dojo, and you've written for plenty of businesses, some very, very big. One particular very big name that we'll just keep secret, but you know, a lot of people know who this person is. And yeah, it's really great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to know how you got started in copywriting in the first place. I don't actually think we've had that conversation before. How did you even discover this world?
Yeah, it is interesting. I kind of fell into it because I'm a writer just in general. My area of expertise was previously definitely mostly fiction. That's what I went to school for. I stumbled into copywriting when I was trying to get into freelancing. And I really wanted to see if I could make it in a career of writing, not just for myself, but also for businesses. And so I kind of got started freelancing with writing resumes. That was kind of my in. Doing some blog posts, that was in as well. And then from there, doing these little projects here and there for clients, I kind of, then I landed my big client, and that from there, that was where it kind of took off. So
I like that. And a lot of people that enjoy writing and enjoy, like even English teachers, there's actually quite a lot of copywriters that are English teachers or have a background in creative writing, and it doesn't pay as well as copywriting, right? It just doesn't pay as well as copywriting. So it's like you have this talent, you're good at writing. Or I mean, I was actually an English teacher for a while before I became a copywriter. Like I wanted to travel the world.
I didn't know that.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I was teaching English, and I taught French a little bit too. And it wasn't full time. It was online. So I was one of those English teachers online. I had a little profile picture of me with one of those mics, like a customer support mic.
Yep.
And it's like learn English with Matt. And then I'd like have a couple of calls with people from Brazil and Europe, and I'd teach them English. And so I really did like languages. I really liked communication, and I enjoyed English. But it's like you can't monetize it as quickly or as well. And then there's other people that have the same thing. So it's cool to see that that's actually your entry point, into this world, because you can take all those skills and convert them into copywriting, and you actually have it's a good advantage over many people that don't have that skill,
Yeah, that's definitely what I've seen in the space. For a bit, I felt pretty insecure about being a fiction writer in the copywriting space. One of my huge goals was to make more time so that I could, have my copywriting business, but then also be able to create stories and write for myself on the side. That was like my biggest goal. But I actually think that coming from a fiction background really helped me understand like the nuances of language. And fiction is just empathy. I would argue that copywriting is also just empathy. And so they really intermingle really well. So
interesting. What else do you see as like very similar to copywriting? Because a lot of people from the proper world of writing think copywriting is like this degenerate mess writing.
Yes.
But there's a lot in common. You know, it's like, oh,
Yes.
you can't start a sentence with and. How can you have a ... incomplete sentences? How can you start, can use connecting words to begin sentences, all that kind of stuff. And then the copywriters also think that like the English professors also like, they're old school, but I think that there's truth to both of them, right? Because it's just language. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. About a month ago, I was talking to a creative director at an agency, just chatting with him. And I had told him my background. I was like, I'm a fiction writer. That's my background. And he even said, he's like, yeah, I don't know how to find good copywriters. Like, where are they actually made? Like, where are they coming out of? Which I thought was really interesting because it is true. It's copywriting. I'm always curious to see how people land into the industry because I feel like it's from all over the place. But I would argue that marketing is just storytelling. I mean, so much of it is just storytelling. And because I come from a background where it's all about story, it's all about trying to get people to connect with your characters. Well, now it's just aiming it towards the customer and telling a story to them and drawing them into the story. So I would say like the storytelling is the huge piece that I think really more people should incorporate into marketing. People thrive on stories. I mean, I actually think it's really funny that we've created a culture that's around story, if you think about it. I mean, look at, Netflix, books, all these streaming services. People are spending their time being immersed in other worlds and other stories. That's really interesting. So if we can take those things and also translate them into copywriting, I actually think that there's a lot more brand loyalty that happens, and customers want to be part of something, and you can include them in that. They want to feel heard and seen. That's why they love the stories that they love. And so if we use that and incorporate that into copywriting, it becomes more deeper rather than just selling something to someone.
100% agree with that. I think a lot of copywriters, they don't really put enough effort into writing stories. I mean, story emails is a perfect example. Now, in the dojo, we write a lot of emails, and copywriters recently, a couple of copywriters that are working their way, up in level, like they're leveling up. They've got a bit of way to go still, but they're getting pretty good. I told them, I was like, you guys don't have any story emails for me to review. Why is that? Why am I not reviewing any story emails? And it's like, oh, because that's the one. That's the one that actually makes the biggest difference. My favorite type of copy is story ads, story emails, story VSLs, everything story, video stories. There's always a story. And it's the same with like these interviews. It's like we've almost got a bit of a story here going. It's like you went from this world into copywriting. There's a story in that. And everything has that. There's a theme I find with every person I chat with. And I just think that there's so few people that put their energy into that. I don't know. What do you think? It's like it's overwhelming, or it's too much work, or why do people not focus on story so much if it's such a important part of being human?
Right. It's something that I was thinking about this morning, actually, because I was thinking about this in terms of, how do we see stories in brands shape our world? And I was thinking about, huge brands like Disney or Coca-Cola, they're selling merchandise and people are wearing their brand, literally walking advertisements. How did they buy into that? And it's because they feel connected, like personally associated with the brand, like they find their identity in it. But they've made it look so subtle, I would say. And I do think that it takes more work to dig deep and see the stories that lie behind brands or the stories that people are buying into. Because I do think that it takes more work to develop a story versus taking a point, backing up that point, and trying to persuade someone. So, I don't want to call it laziness, but I do think that people discount that power because they're like, well, it's just a story. But all the emails, I like to keep track of the emails that I subscribe to and then I click on, because even subconsciously when I'm walking, when I'm clicking on an email, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not thinking actively, oh, this person just made me click. I'm reading through and after the fact, I'm like, why did I click? Why did I actually, take an extra step to go to their website? And most of the time it's because they've included some sort of story, whether it was involving me or another customer, whether it was saying, hey, this person was stuck in this lifestyle and moved into this. Story feels personal. I was thinking about this morning as well, of how specificity is actually the driver of good copywriting. I think a lot of copywriters look very big picture at things, trying to promise these huge things like wealth, status. But really you have to narrow that down, because you can't actually promise those things, but you can promise that they'll feel more confident the next day, or it's more nuanced. But digging into story helps dig into that specificity and draw that out, and people can identify with the specifics, because they'll always think, oh, I thought that was just me. But then if someone has a similar experience who's totally different, on the other side of the world, but they have a similar experience, they have similar emotions, they instantly feel connected to that brand or to that buy-in. And they're like, oh, they get it. They get the problem. But that's a different kind of craft that I think that a lot of copywriting and copywriters kind of stay away from, because it feels foreign to sales. Maybe not to marketing, but it feels foreign to sales. Because I do think a lot of copywriting, you kind of have to balance the marketing creative plus the sales, the numbers. So you can get a little logical about it. I see a lot of, and I kind of have to check myself sometimes too. When I am writing copy, I can get into more of the pitchy, salesy kind of language. It's very easy to stumble into. And I have to check myself and say, but if I was the customer, if I was the reader reading this, would I feel seen? Would I feel known? Would I feel understood? Or would I just feel advertised to? So
from our conversation, it seems to me that the real skill for writers, fiction writers, and also for copywriters, that's actually, the real skill behind everything. Because in the fiction writing world, maybe it's like, oh, did you say it properly? Did you describe this correctly? There's a lot of like, it should be right. There's a right way, and people can get distracted by there's a right way to do it. And then in the copywriting world, it's like the conversions, you can get distracted by data. But behind both of them, you said empathy, but it's like tactful empathy.
Yes.
You got to have like a nuance to it, right? You got to really, if you're dealing with a customer and you're trying to sell them something and you're trying to show them a different way, you got to do it in a way that they don't feel like you're selling necessarily.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the same with fiction writing. It's like, you don't want to make them feel like you're narrating from the place of narration. It's like, oh, they're narrating right now. Like it's got to feel that you're completely immersed in it. And that's, I think, maybe where stories get a bit weak, is that a lot of the time it just feels like, oh, they're telling a story now. And then it's like, it's weak, So having that tactful empathy where you can say, okay, well, we're approaching something and we want to show we understand them and we want them to feel understood, but we also don't want them to like know that that's our aim, in a sense.
Right.
It's like it's just happening. It's just happening. I think that's the real command of good, like that's good communication, is when you can actually approach a subject from a place like that. I'll just give you an example. So I'm actually coming up with a piece of copy right now. I'm writing about canceling something. So for somebody that cancels a subscription, and a lot of people would just approach this and say like, oh, don't cancel because you're missing out on this and you're missing out on this and you're missing out on this. And it's like, yeah, technically that's copywriting and it should probably like reduce the cancellation rate. But it's such a direct message that I feel that the market that reads this is going to see it for what it is like, this is an attempt at stopping me from canceling. Therefore, you lose the magic of the writing. Whereas if you make it like, hey, you might be considering canceling right now, but before you do, here's a few things you can do to make the most of your investment, because if you join, chances are you want this and this result. So here's how you can make the most and get those things first. So it's like, it's almost the exact same conversation, but the frame, the way that you approach it is like just very, very nuanced. And I think many copywriters, they haven't developed a command or a command over English or just that ability to go that nuanced yet. And it's like, I often find with my feedback with copywriters, I'm like, like you gotta just, there's something here, I can't pinpoint it, but like, you're just not quite hitting the right nuance of this.
Right. Yeah. And I actually think that copywriters need to read more and not just advertising material. Go and read an essay, go read short stories. And pay attention to those things, because writers subtly weave things in so carefully that you have this epiphany by the end of the story. You didn't even realize that they were leading you toward that. It's really powerful. I love that. I really love that new angle, because I do think that like unsubscribe emails, it's so hard to get around. Hey, just don't go. We want you back. Yeah.
Yeah, it requires tact. I think that's what's a lot of the time missing, especially with skeptical markets, is that the copy these days is very, I mean, copies, average copy's kind of always been average copy, but it's particularly obvious today because of how many new people have entered the industry and how many people are teaching. I mean, take, for example, an 8-figure business owner, right? They may be very, very well known and recognized, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their copy is the 10 out of 10 copy. It might be the brand that's doing most of the heavy lifting. So now people look at that piece of copy and they say, oh, this is a good piece of copy. That's what good copy looks like. And I would just say probably over 50% of the time I look at top businesses' copy, I can point out many things that I think could make it better. And that's not even, I don't even think that's something because of my experience. I think a lot of good copywriters could quite quickly point out like, oh, you said this or you said that. Or it's like, this is weak. That's weak. This is not compelling. That's not really, it's too obvious sometimes. It's like the reader knows that they're reading a sales message. They're just going to turn off.
Yes. Yeah. And we're so bombarded with advertisements. I'm probably getting the statistic wrong, but last year I'd read a copywriting book, and they had talked about how in the 70s, like the average number of advertisements someone saw every day was 500, which is, significant. Now it's like 3,000. Now it has
per day
tripled a day.
Crazy.
Isn't that insane?
That is crazy.
And so if you think about it, people don't want to be sold to. I mean, the advertisements that I'll sit and watch now are the ones that either like they get the problem better than I do and they speak to me, or they're funny. Or sometimes if they're emotionally moving, I would say it depends, but people just aren't going to go for like the mediocre anymore. They're just not going to pass. And they never have, but even more so now, is that we're just so bombarded. And I think the average now is like the first 3 seconds, if you're posting any video or reel, the first 3 seconds have to grab someone or they're going to scroll away, which feels really fast to us. But I also think it just makes sense for our day and age, which is why we have to have such strong hooks, but also we have to pull along into the story, because it's also not good enough just to have a strong hook and then leave them hanging, because then it's like, okay, well, now it feels like clickbait. Now it feels like you reeled me in and you did not deliver.
And that's going to cost the advertiser money, because now they're paying for all these people that don't actually end up doing anything, right? Or get disappointed. Yeah, well, I don't know if the statistic either. It sounds probable that it's 3,000 people, 3,000 ads, And I just think to myself, even if it's just 500, even if we just go back to the 1970 statistic, if you see 500 ads a day, your brain is shut off. You are like, everyone in your market is turning off. So how are you, because copywriters, they write their copy. I say this to a lot of newer copywriters. It's like they write their copy with the assumption people are going to read it.
Right.
And I'm reading the copy and I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to say. And then the copywriter is like, no, read down. Go, like, read down. You'll see what I'm about. I say, it doesn't matter. If I have to scroll down to start caring, it's too late. Like, if I'm asking you, what is this about? I don't get it. And you tell me to keep reading to understand, you've lost the prospect, right?
Yep, exactly.
So I'm not even interested in reading from, just as a, like, putting myself in the prospect's shoes if I don't know what's going on. And it's the same thing with context. Like, a lot of copywriters will say, well, here's the context of my copy. I don't need context. A lot of copy coaches, they want to have context. Tell me what the business is, who the market is, why I should. It's like, I don't want context, because the reader doesn't have context when they see the ad. The first time they see the ad for the first second, that's the first piece of context they have. If you give me all this context previously, it's not the same as the natural experience that like a prospect is experiencing. And I've got enough experience with most of the industries to, get into the shoes of whoever it is. But anyway, I think it's interesting that you say that, because then I guess the question becomes, how do you actually improve your command over the English language, build that empathy, improve at your hooks, really weave in a powerful sales message without just being this very obvious chat GPT or templatized copy. How do you go about developing like that?
Yeah, I would say, like, the biggest thing is you have to step into your customer's shoes. And this is where I think the fiction helps, is because I almost come up with, which they've always done this, like the customer personas, brands do that. And so I kind of do that with my customer, is I think, what do they care about? What are they listening to? What are they reading? What are they watching in their free time? It's not going to be the same across the board, but it doesn't need to be. I just put on that persona, and then I dig really deep. I do a lot of research. It's something that I really thrive on. I read a ton of reviews. I actually think that reviews are where, I don't want to give away my secrets, but that really is, like, people are honest in reviews. And so, like, look at the products that your customer is buying. It doesn't have to be even the same industry, but what are they saying? What are the things that they care about? What are they irritated by? And then I love YouTube comments, and people will be honest on YouTube. So I find the similar things. And then I weave stories from that. And if you have, if you're working for the company that has customer stories and testimonials, go seek them out, because they're so important for conversion, because that really is where people are like, they want to buy in, and they want to buy in when they like the people who are buying in. And so if you have people who have similar stories and who are dealing with the same issues, they feel seen. And then I think that just reading a lot, which it sounds very simple, but I really don't think that people read a lot. They don't read, they read a lot of self-help, and they read a lot of the nonfiction, like, let's just get 10x your life, and I just think that language it doesn't resonate with people the way that maybe it used to. It just doesn't connect. We're living in a time of deep disconnect, even post-pandemic, which, it's been years now, but I do think that people really crave personal connection. That's always been a thing. And so, it's taking the time to do the research and taking the time to go into the weeds and do the research. Some of my best copywriting angles and ads and emails have been because I found a sweet little gem in a comment section of a Reddit post or a review where they said it better than even I could, where they were like, this is my issue. And then I straight up repeated it back in an email. And people really resonated with it because people want honesty and people want just tell it like it is. This is my difficulty. Just tell me how it is. Don't try to big picture me and be like, I can solve all your problems. People are more willing to listen to you if they feel understood by you.
I like it. So empathy comes from learning about the person, living their life for a few days, going into the Reddit, immersing yourself in their life to the point where you basically can see their life as well. And I mean, ideally, if you're already a customer, it's probably even better, right? If you're already a customer, then you're just kind of talking to yourself. But if you're not, then you do that immersion. And then to build the tact, to build the skill of approaching a skeptical prospect without just being completely obvious and salesy, don't read just nonfiction. That's what my takeaway is like read real writing, because nonfiction doesn't have to be written. I mean, nonfiction can be written in a very copywriting format. A lot of these books are very simple English, whereas a good fiction novel might actually challenge your vocabulary as well sometimes, because the fiction writer is like, I'm choosing this word not because I want you to read on to the next sentence, but because it accurately describes what we're talking about. So like you need to go and learn that word, and so you understand what I'm sharing, right? Whereas copywriting is a lot of the time like, let's not make the reader do any work. Whereas I think, yeah, so that's, and I've often felt that. I mean, I read the 48 Laws of Power, and that book has a lot of nonfiction to it, but there's plenty of stories that have they're written in a very, like, the writing is very similar to fiction writing. And listening to those stories, I was very entertained by the stories. And so I think that, yeah, like you're saying, when you consume good literature, when you consume good writing, you're going to be able to improve on just the way that you communicate ideas. But also, when you do read nonfiction, you're just going to read for the idea, maybe, not so much for the writing itself.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I would even, I mean, people might think this is outlandish, but I would even encourage people to read poetry as well, because poetry is all about capturing people's attention and empathy at a line level. I mean, these beautiful, or even look at song lyrics. We have to get better at being very meticulous at the craft level, because that's really where people buy in. I think it's interesting that there's such a resurgence of fantasy and romance novels right now. I think it clearly shows what people want. People want escape, and people want to be seen and loved. You know, how do you do that in a not gimmicky way? Through copy. I agree. I see too much copywriting that's just really dry, that has it's just not entertaining. I really think that great copy can do all of these things at once. I love digging in and seeing what people are doing, and if they're doing it well or if they're doing it poorly. But the best copy is the one that's like, oh, you just subtly told the whole thing without me even realizing it. Read for the craft level as well, for sure. Because the other thing is that there's also a lot of like poetic devices and metaphor and things like that people can learn like through that, and that's so powerful in copywriting. Is metaphor, is, you know, putting yourself into someone else's shoes or imagining something and relating to it. And so all of these things, like, you can learn, but just by studying the language. So, yeah. And I do agree that with nonfiction, you can find really well done prose. I think the difficulty is that some of the nonfiction that's being circulated most of the time, it doesn't, right now, I think that it doesn't have that level of craft. But I the 48 Laws of Power I've not read yet, but it's been on my list. But go for the things that people like that have withstood the test of time. That's what I always think. Like, what are the works that people are still going back to? I think it was Robert Cialdini's. I can't remember what it's about persuasion. I do not remember
Influence?
the title. Yes, that's the one. That one's excellent. But it's because it digs so deep, once again, kind of like you were saying about the 48 Laws of Power. It digs into story. That's why it's interesting, because he's just, it's old, so it could be seen as outdated, like the data. But the reason why it's not is because he's telling stories, and stories don't grow old. Like they don't go get outdated.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah,
they don't grow old.
Yeah.
There's also something to be said about energy, because energy is a big thing in writing. You know, you can read a good fiction from, 100 years ago, and there's an energy that writer had in that writing, and it's not the same kind of energy that you might experience in a self-help book. You read a fiction novel, and there's a whole new world that you get transported into. And so being able to experience that as a consumer, I think makes you better at producing that kind of an experience too. Right. So for me, I don't have a lot of books. I'm not a big reader, but more of my books on my bookshelf here, I'm just looking at it over here, I have more fiction than I do nonfiction. Because I just don't. Right. I just don't. It's if you're gonna write something. Nonfiction today. A lot of the time, and this is just my perspective on it. I know a lot of people are gonna say, oh, I read like 30 books a year or 55 books a year. CEOs read that many. I usually just read the first 2 chapters of a lot of these nonfiction books and find that the big point that they wanted to make, they made in chapter 2. Chapter 1 was their hard sob story. Chapter 2 is this revelationary idea that they've had. And then the next 16 chapters is how they applied it into like 500 different situations. So it's like, okay, I got the idea. By chapter 2, I'm already like, okay, I'm going to go and use it. And I sometimes never get back to the book because I was like, okay, I got the idea. I'm going to go and use it. But a fiction novel or a good story, it doesn't even have to be a book. I think a lot of people could also just get this with a good movie. I believe that. I think a good movie, like a well-produced, well-directed movie, can also have an effect like that, or in a series as well, a good series. You go and you watch this thing, or you can't just end a novel. I was watching a series the other day, a Japanese anime series actually, and it's a classic one, so it's got a very quality story behind it, and it's like I can't put it down, I can't stop watching because I want to know what happens in the next episode. And my friend recently started watching Shogun, which is apparently a really good series. I haven't started watching yet, and I'm like scared because I know if I start watching it, I'm going to be completely like sucked into it, So I think that's missing. I think that what I found with, at least with email marketing, email copywriting, is that prospects have a very boring. We all have a very boring life. If you really want to summarize your entire existence, the majority of your day is very much just sort of routine, like repeat, same sort of stuff. So when prospects are sitting in their 9-to-5 office job and they get an email from you, the real value that you can create for them is entertaining them, is being a little bit of color in their day. If you make the prospect smile, you give them a little bit of hope, you give them a little bit of joy, you give them a little bit of excitement, a little bit of vision for their future. That's how you can sell them. That's what I often like to do in my emails. I'll like make a little joke, I'll tell a little story, I'll connect with them, I'll make them relate to me or relate to my client, and then sort of lead them down and say, and there's more of that experience, more of that entertainment, more of that excitement, more of that joy for life in the link kind of thing, like click the link. But that's actually what I'm doing behind the scenes. I'm not saying, oh, life is so horrible, you're struggling, everything's so bad, this is going to solve everything, click this link. That doesn't work. No one wants that,
No.
So,
right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. I've always tried to also incorporate humor and like tongue-in-cheek comments because people really do resonate with it. They love it. And there is a statistic. I need to get these numbers down better. It's either 82% or 92%. It's really high though. Like it's either 80 or 90%. People remember humorous advertisements more. That's the statistic. Like it's so high. And so that should...
I still remember ads. Sorry to cut you off, but I still remember ads that are like very funny. Like in South Africa, advertising, there's a lot of funny, there's a lot of comedic advertising. They got this one ad to, what is it? They're like selling Nando's, chicken or something, or spice or something. And they got this ad about this guy. So I still remember it, right? They got this ad of this guy. He's in the soccer field and he gets kicked and then he like rolls to the floor. Yeah. But then he rolls out of the stadium and like keeps rolling all the way down the street until he gets to the Nando's. Right. And then he's like happy he's finally like made it to the so I was like, this is such a brilliant ad because I guess it's a ripoff of whoever watches soccer, you'll know it's a ripoff of like Neymar, because he's always rolling around on the floor whenever he gets he just gets kicked and then he starts rolling. So they're like not only making a joke about a well-known soccer player, but now is rolling out. Brilliant advertising. It's like AI is not going to create that for you. It's just not going to happen. So what are your thoughts on that actually? On how AI is actually affecting the copywriting world, and how you can keep winning in 2025 and beyond?
I personally don't use AI. I don't really like it very much, which that's a whole other thing. But I would say I wish that people would use it more as a research versus writing. It really should only be used as like a brainstorming or like starting off point, because the reality is that, the way that AI takes things is it's just taking it and generating. So it's just taking what's already out there and maybe like more summarizing it. But you need to go do the actual digging. Like, you can't let AI do all of the work. I think it can be starting off points. I actually think you had a post about it recently that I liked, where you were talking about, I don't remember exactly, but it was talking about different angles and different pain points. And I was like, that kind of thing, I think that makes sense as a starting off point. But the dryness of the writing that comes out of AI, you just can't use it. Like, I see too much of it. It's all the same language. There's certain phrases now too that AI loves, and it'll use those things over and over again. And now they're just like, oh, this used to be a good, I kind of want to say one of them is like game changing. Like, it's a game changer. I feel like that's a huge one. Now you just can't use it anymore because
everybody just says, oh, it's game changer this, game changer that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so if that's your learning device and you're like relying on that, you're just not going to move forward. You might peak for a little bit, but I mean, it's only as good as the other things that people are putting out there, honestly. Like, that's just how it is. Because AI can't innovate. That's only something that we can do. And so we can't rely on that for the innovation. So yeah, I don't use AI. I prefer just to do all of my own research. I do all of my own writing. And part of that is just because I would rather know and understand versus letting something else know and understand. Because that's just like the strategy. It's helpful for the strategy. But I think it should only be used as like a taking off point, or like if you get stuck and you need something like brainstorming ideas. I get that. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is that it's also taking the most common thing. So as far as like, brainstorming like headlines or like subject lines, I've seen people do that. The only issue is that it's taking what's most common practice. So it's just giving you the things that people are already doing. And so your stuff might not stand out if you're using what it's offering. So I would say, I really think that people should get back to the desire to know the customer themselves, be immersed themselves, do the research, do the hard work themselves. Because really that's going to help you move faster. Like, that actually is the thing. Like, AI could, the argument is that AI is so much faster, but you have to do so much editing. So it's not actually faster. Whereas even if it is faster, you still have to know how to write copy in the first place to make sure it's faster, right? Yes, exactly. And you still have to fact check it. I mean, that's the other thing, is that it's not always accurate. And so I can see it helpful as a tool, but I would caution people, especially, honestly, if you're a new copywriter, do not use AI. You need to go out and learn it yourself, or that's just going to be a crutch forever. And it's just, you're not going to move forward if you just don't understand what you're actually looking for. Because you don't know how to fix the problem if you actually don't understand the problem at all. I think that newer copywriters, they lean on AI too much, and they get stuck because of that. Because they lean on AI so much, they're expecting AI to help them they're expecting AI to be producing better copy instead of themselves. So that's like, okay, well, I'm still a 5 out of 10 copywriter. I want to try and get my AI to produce 7 out of 10 copy, now 8 out of 10 copy, now 9 out of 10 copy. It's like, but you're still a 5. And for the non-native English speakers, that's, the non-native English speakers, I see the value in putting your whole piece of copy in ChatGPT or
or whatever, and saying, hey, can you go through this and just rewrite some of this, the sections where I say something that doesn't sound natural in English. I get that. But that's, again, now you're using it as a tool again. Now you're using it the right way, where it's, I'm guiding the process, I've written the copy, or I know what I wanted to say. I'm using the ability that the language processing system that AI is like going to process it for you, or help you come up with analogies, or help you come up with interesting different ways to say the first sentence. But you're still the one that's like, hey, I want to come up with a joke. I want to put it here. Here's what I have in mind. Can you come up with a few similar jokes? Give me some ideas. Now it produces your ideas. Now you can lean on that. But you had the idea of putting the joke in that section, for example, in the first place. It was your idea. It wasn't AI's idea. So yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of beginner copywriters, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot because they don't understand this one thing about AI, So I like it. How do you get better clients and use your particular, you've got some particular skills as a copywriter because of your background. You can use those to demonstrate that you're really good at your craft. But how do you go about getting clients from, high paying clients with all of this?
Yes, I do think it's an advantage. In the past, sometimes it's been made to seem like it was a disadvantage because they do.
That's what I was thinking
like,
about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really, though, my whole thing is this, like, we can't help what we come from, right? That's not what, but we can, like, but this is what I'm passionate about, is what I love about copywriting. Because for a long time, I felt like kind of a sellout because I was like, oh, I want to be this literary fiction writer. And I still do. But I feel like a sellout because I'm writing advertisements. I'm using my gift to sell these things. It just felt like, but then I just realized, I was like, no, you know what? This isn't on either side. Like, this is actually an advantage. And it's because of the empathy piece. It's because of the storytelling. So I do love to play into that when I am trying to get new clients. I think I felt discouraged for a while because I felt like a fraud in the copywriting space because I didn't have necessarily a sales background. I didn't come from these big, business backgrounds. I came from I write fiction and poetry. And it just felt like, oh, can I does this translate? And there's definitely differences for sure. But I also like the differences because it doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing. I enter different spaces, when I'm working on my own things versus for clients. But I like to push into that because I do think that because a lot of copywriting tends to push more salesy and pitchy, because I come from a background of, no, I want to make your brand elegant. I want it to be appealing and personable to someone. I want them to stick around for the long haul. I don't want them to just be a one-time customer. How is that built? It's built through story. It's built through these. So I'm very upfront about it whenever I'm pitching to clients and on my website and all of those things, because I've just come to realize that I just need to embrace this because it's not a disadvantage. It's actually, it helps me understand people more and do better research. And honestly, it's helpful creatively as well. If I'm struggling for certain angles, sitting there and brainstorming, I can play around with different ways of saying things because I know writing on the craft level. And one way is going to sound totally different from another way, and it's going to work better. And I think that it's also, because I have my master's in writing from Johns Hopkins, and I I like to lead with those things because I want people to see, I was like, I'm a hard worker as well. Like, this isn't just, I'm trying to move into the space to make money. It's because I really enjoy this. And I now have dedicated myself to this, to learning this and to understanding it. And I've also done well in it. So, because I think you've said this a lot in the dojo, let clients know about your interests. Like, people want to, work with people who have personalities. You don't have to just be I think you had shared one time that you connected with someone based on your mutual love for chess. I might be wrong about that, but I think I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because it's just true. And so I want to also show that I'm passionate about other things that's going to bleed into my work for you as my client. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think telling people that your passion is writing so that you decided to make it your career is like a very, very good, it's a good statement to make, and I've had a few people that I've coached that were English teachers previously. And one of them had to keep saying, no, man, it's not don't let this limit you. If anything, it's an advantage, because how many people have command over English to the level that you do? You've been coaching or teaching for the last 10 years. Lean into it. Say, English teacher gone rogue became sales copywriter. It's funny. People would like that. Make that your hook, or your lead in when you talk to potential clients, and people would like that, because business owners, they're looking for a good copywriter. They're looking for somebody with a personality. And I often tell copywriters, and maybe you've heard me say this before, but for those listening, it's like, you don't need to be a 10 out of 10 copywriter to get a multi-million-dollar client, because the very, very best copywriters in the game, they also have career goals. They usually become directors of marketing teams, or they add on a different set of skills and they become an agency, or they build their own product. They end up moving out of the space. So they're not directly competing with you anymore. All of the best, they either have their own product, they have an agency, or they do something else. And if they have an agency, then they're actually hiring junior copywriters to do majority of the work. It's not even their writing anymore. So most of the time, you're not directly competing with the best copywriters. You're competing against 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 copywriters. The rest have already moved on in their career. So you look at these big businesses and you say, oh, what could I possibly offer? And I think of, in particular, the client that you work with, we're not naming names, but it's like that business owner, I thought to myself, damn, Abigail, you got this is a serious business owner. This is somebody that I think a lot of people would never think that they could work with. They say, oh, I'll never be able to work with someone this influential, or this who's done this and that, And yet you were able to do that, and
it's true.
You didn't have this. You didn't have this massive, crazy background of copywriting experience or sales experience to do it. And that's the point. I think the point is, you don't have to be a 10 out of 10 copywriter. You have a lot more skill in English, in the English and poetry and writing field than you did in copywriting when you closed this client. Now, I'd say you're significantly a stronger writer than when you closed them. But when you closed them, you had a lot of opportunity to grow still, and you still do. Everybody does. I still go.
Yes.
But it's you still did. And that's the thing for if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, let me go and work on my skills a bit more, and maybe next year I'll try and work with a big business. It's like, no, you gotta. Do you have anything to say to those people that just don't believe that they think that everything in their past is why they're not ready, or why they shouldn't, do something yet?
Right. I would say it might feel opposite. But don't be too proud of your past to try to fail with getting a big client. Because I actually think that might be a little bit of a pride of well, I don't have that background. It feels opposite of pride, but you can get kind of well, woe is me. I don't have this background. I mean, that was me for a little bit. I mean, for a while, I was like, well, I don't have this big background in copywriting. Is anybody going to take me? I felt really insecure about it. And then I realized I was like, who cares? Because the reality is that people just want to see that they don't care about background so much as they care about, where you're headed and, whether you care about getting better. That was a huge thing that I also let that client into my process, and I let them see like, this is what I'm doing. So that they could also forge that trust and be like, oh, Abigail's not just writing because she thinks this is correct. She's looking at the data. She's looking at all of these things. She's writing in a very specific way. So letting people into that process as well and saying how you got from this background to now is really important, because that will help form the trust. So I would say, to the people who are kind of struggling with their background of, how can I break into this? Look to that background and see how it's your advantage, and then kind of tell yourself your own story of how did I move from this space to this space, so that you can tell clients that story and develop that trust and show them that this actually isn't a disadvantage. This is an advantage. Because I honestly think that a lot of clients, I mean, like I had mentioned earlier in my conversation with an agency owner like about a month ago, a creative director, he had said, he's like, I don't know where to find good copywriters. He's like, what industry did they come out of? He's like, I don't know. And I thought that was really interesting. So I would argue that people are actually less concerned about background than you are, but you have to tell the story. Like, you have to be able to vouch for yourself and say how this isn't a disadvantage, right? Because if you're not able to convince yourself of that, you won't be able to convince anybody else.
It'll come through. People will feel that insecurity or feel that doubt. So again, it comes back to stories then. It comes back to stories and empathy.
Really does. Yep.
Yeah. You're going to be able to tell your story and show why your story, this is why I am who I am and why I'm the perfect fit to work with you and why I'm going to crush it for you, And how many copywriters spend all their time selling everybody else and then they don't sell themselves, And so maybe that's a tactic that, you can use if you're watching this, because that's what I've done before. I said to a few people, go ahead and pretend that you're a client. Write your name down on a Google Doc, and as if you're writing a client's name on the Google Doc, and then sell that client for a little bit and see how that goes, and see if there's anything in there that you can use on sales calls and applications and cover letters. And then just really work on story copy, because I believe if you can master good story copy, and I think that everything else is a lot easier, because I often how many times I find myself writing a good piece of copy and I'm like, the way I'm convincing them just doesn't, it feels like this market would see through it, and I'm struggling to convince them. And I'm like, I'm not going to try this persuasion tactic. I'm just going to tell a story and weave in what I want to say into my story. I usually end up doing that. I usually say, okay, I'm trying to shift a belief. I'm trying to give them a new perspective. I'm struggling to do it with statistics or logic or sales argument. I'm just going to tell a story. And I can always just fall back on, all right, I'll just tell a story. And if you have the ability to do that as a copywriter, then you can say, oh, you know what? I can't figure out a way to make this compelling. I'm just going to rely on a story. Like, how powerful is that to be able to just say,
yes,
let me lean on story? Because story is the most powerful way to do it. So it's like, if you can't do story, and instead of story, you're always leaning on everything else, I think you're handicapped.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Especially because I think story is also naturally interesting. it's more naturally interesting to want to read a story about someone who was in a similar situation to you than just trying to talk, being talked toward. And so it also just has a natural advantage, I would argue. I mean, I remember one email that I had clicked on, maybe recently, maybe not. But the subject line contained part of the story of like, this is what we're going to talk about. He had this problem. That was it. And I clicked on it and I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. Because it went through the motions of like, yeah, because it had this natural intrigue to it. So I hope that people will take that away from this of wanting to test out story more, because it really is, it has that natural advantage of being interesting. And you can put in all of your points, and if you make it interesting in a story, like you can make all of your points in the same way, but
through a story.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's really as simple as just consuming more stories, good stories. I mean, there's obviously tactics. You can Google hero journey or hero story, and you probably get a lot of videos on YouTube already showing you foundational or core story structures, and you can start there. I went through a course that was priced at a couple $1,000s, and half of the content was just very, very simple fluff that you could find on YouTube.
Right.
I think that, so it's like, how do you write a story? Abigail, how do you write a story? It's like, well, you already said how to do it. It's just go look at, go read fiction, read a good story. I also say don't just consume books, read books. Go and watch a movie where you get, even, especially if you struggle with reading, start there, or listen to an audiobook. I listen to audiobooks, but you need
Absolutely.
to get into the experience of a good story. I love stories. That's what I'm doing when I'm not working is I'm often in a good story. It's funny. It's actually one of my core 20 habits I have for my life. I don't really talk about this yet. Maybe I'll create a video on it. But in my 20, one of them, I think number 19 or number 20, one of them is music, and then the other one's a good story. Every month I have to consume at least one good story. Because that's, to me, that brings life, like there's something happening. It's like, yes. I always look forward to that story, whether it's a series, whether it's a book, whether it's a game, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I have to have a good story. So yeah, thanks so much. That's really valuable. Where can people reach you if they want to learn more secrets?
Oh man. You can reach me on Facebook. You can DM me. I'm also on Instagram. Abigail James Allen. That's my handle. Very simple, straightforward. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It was it was great. I got some good ideas and I want to go write some story emails now. So thanks so much.
Yes, I know. I also feel charged up. I'm like, okay.
I'm gonna go write some stories. All right, chat with you soon. Thanks again.
Okay,
Take care.
Cool. Bye.